Hey guys, welcome back to the garage. My name is Cameron. Today, we wanted to add this all sports lift kit to our Yamaha Drive 2. We're gonna walk you through on how we did it. Our lift kit choice of the day is All Sport. All Sport's a brand made in America. We'll be adding a 4-inch lift kit to our golf cart, but this video can be used for a 6-inch lift kit too. Here's what you're gonna have out of the box. These will be the tools you're gonna need to complete the lift kit. First step to any good golf cart project is safety. First, make sure your parking brake is engaged. Make sure your key is in the off position and your run tow switch is in tow. Now we're gonna go ahead and jack up the golf cart. I like to jack it up from right here. Go ahead and put your jacks underneath the golf cart. Alrighty, go ahead and take off your wheels. I'm gonna use a flathead screwdriver to get these hubcaps off. And after that, we'll use an impact with a 19mm socket. You can now go ahead and remove your bumper. On the back side of the bumper, there will be 4 10mm bolts. So go ahead and grab your 10mm socket and get them off. Now it's time to remove your wheel hub. Go ahead and use a flathead screwdriver and pop this rubber piece off. Now that we've taken the wheels off, you could see that ours did not have a cotter pin. Y'all's would have a cotter pin, so go ahead and pull that out. Then we're gonna use a 3/4 socket and remove this nut. The wheel hub should come right off. Go ahead and save the wheel hub, the washer, and the nut for later. And do the same for both sides. Alrighty, now we're gonna remove the tie rod from the spindle. So go ahead and put a 17mm wrench on top with a 17mm socket on the bottom. Make sure to save this nut. You can go ahead and screw it right back on there for later. And do the same for both sides. Let's go ahead and remove the spindle. You're gonna have a 14mm bolt that goes all the way through with a 14mm nut. Go ahead and save the nut and bolt for later. And do the same for both sides. Alrighty, now we're gonna remove the shocks. To remove the bottom bolt on the shock, go ahead and grab your 17mm wrench and your 17mm socket. So to remove the bolt on the top of the shock, it is a little bit of a tighter space, so we're gonna use a 14mm wrench and a 14mm socket on a ratchet. Now do the same for the other side. Alrighty, now we're gonna remove the control arm. For the front bolt, we're gonna go ahead and use a 14mm wrench and a 14mm socket. And for the back bolt, because we have the steering box, we're gonna go ahead and take that 14mm socket and put it on a ratchet. And do the same for both sides. Alrighty, now we're gonna install the upper shock mount. So go ahead and put your inch bolt through the old shock mount, and using a washer on each side, go ahead and place your 9/16 nut and hand tighten it. After doing that to both sides, go ahead and take your 9/16 wrench and your 9/16 socket and a ratchet and tighten it up. Hey guys, it's me from the future where I've already installed the whole lift kit. You guys are gonna have to remove the bumper bracket, and to make it easier on you guys, we're gonna have you remove it before you install everything. So now you're gonna remove 4 12mm bolts that are holding the bumper bracket on. You'll take your 12mm wrench and you're gonna go at the bottom of the bracket where you have a 12mm nut, and then you're gonna take your 12mm socket and put it on top. And if you see, we are struggling here. That's why we're having y'all do it before. After you've removed this, go ahead and save it with the nuts and bolts, because we will reuse them when we install it after everything else has been installed. All right, now time to install the A-arm assembly lift. When installing the A-arm assembly lift, it can be heavy. So if you have a buddy, have them help you out. If you're lonely like me, this is how you're gonna do it. I like to mount it on my feet and use them to guide it up. Then you can go ahead and take your 1-inch bolt with a washer, and then your other washer and your 9/16 nut, and put it on the other side. And go ahead and hand tighten that. And do the same for both sides. All right, once your bolts are hand tight, we only want to tighten the back 2 bolts, because later we'll be putting in a control arm in between these brackets. And if you tighten the front and the back bolt, it'll suck it in and you won't be able to put in your control arm. When tightening the back bolt on the A-arm assembly lift, go ahead and use a 9/16 wrench and a 9/16 socket and ratchet, and do the same for both sides. Alrighty, now we're gonna install the control arms. The control arms should have came with 7-inch bolts through it with a 9/16 nut. When you put your control arm on, you want the actual arm that has the heim joint on it coming out the back. After you fit it in there just right, go ahead and put your 7-inch bolt all the way through, and then go ahead and put your 9/16 nut on the back. Go ahead and just hand tighten that. And do the same for both sides. Once you have hand tightened the bolt and nut for the control arm, you can go back to your A-arm assembly lift and tighten that front bolt that we were talking about. So for that, you're still gonna use the 9/16 wrench and a 9/16 socket and ratchet. After you have tightened the front bolt on your A-arm assembly lift, go ahead and take your 9/16 wrench and your 9/16 socket and ratchet. Now do the same for the other side. Alrighty, when we put these spindles in, you'll have a ball joint adapter that sits inside of the heim joint. It should slide right in. After that, go ahead and get your 2-inch bolt with your washer and slide that through. When you put these in, make sure your steering knuckle is facing backwards because that is where your tie rod will go into. After you have that hand tight, repeat on the bottom. Go ahead and take your 9/16 socket and ratchet and tighten it up. After you have tightened the top and bottom bolts of your spindle, now you can see that your drive knuckle is lined up right underneath your tie rod. So go ahead and take that nut off and it'll fit right in there. Then you can tighten the bottom with that same nut you saved. And then go ahead and use your 17mm ratchet and your 17mm wrench to tighten it back up. Earlier we installed this upper shock mount. You're gonna take the top of your shock, making sure the logo is facing forward, and put that on that upper shock mount. Then you're gonna take a washer and a 9/16 nut and hand tighten it on there. When you go to put the shock on the bottom bracket, you wanna make sure you're behind the hole. You might have to push the shock up a little bit. Then you put your washer on your 3-inch bolt and slide it through. Go ahead and put your washer on the back side of the bolt and hand tighten your 9/16 nut on there. Go ahead and tighten both bolts. You're gonna need a 9/16 wrench and a 9/16 socket on a ratchet. And for the top, you only need the ratchet. All right, now it's time to reinstall your wheel hub. It should slide right back on. Then you have that washer that goes right back on there. And then you have that 3/4 nut. Go ahead and hand tighten that first. Go ahead and grab your 3/4 socket and tighten it up. Now take your cotter pin and put it back in the hole and bend it back with a pair of pliers. Now that we have everything installed and make sure everything is tight, you can go ahead and see if it's working right. Give it a few spins to the left and a few spins to the right, and if everything is on there correctly, it should go pretty smooth. Now let's reinstall the bumper bracket. To do so, you're gonna need the original bolts and the original nuts that was holding it on earlier. You're also gonna need this bumper bracket extension. Now, put your washers on the 1/2-inch bolts and line the 2 holes up for the plate. Then, grab a washer and a 1/2-inch nut and tighten it up. Now that you have hand tightened the nuts and bolts, go ahead, take your 1/2 wrench and your 1/2 socket and tighten it up. Go ahead and take your bumper bracket and line the front holes up with the front holes of the bumper bracket extension, and go ahead and feed your 2 1/2-inch bolts through. After you've fed your 2 bolts through, you can now hand tighten the nuts on. We will not be installing any bolts in these holes, and that is okay, it will just free hang right there. And now go ahead and grab your 12mm wrench and your 12mm socket and tighten them up. Now take your bumper and the 4 1/2-inch bolts that we saved from the beginning and reinstall them the same way you took them off. Alrighty guys, now you can go ahead and put on your wheels. In our case, we have 12-inch wheels, so we're gonna be having to add a spacer to prevent our 12-inch wheel from rubbing on any part of the lift. If you guys at home are using anything bigger, you more than likely won't need to do this step. So when putting on your spacer, it's gonna go right on the wheel hub, just like that. And you're gonna use the original metric open-ended lug nuts that came with the golf cart. You guys can now go ahead and put the wheel on. Our spacer requires standard lug nuts, but y'all's might be different. Once you have your spacer and wheels on, Go ahead and give it a few turns to make sure nothing is rubbing. After you guys have reinstalled your wheels, go ahead and remove the jacks and lower your cart back down. So to start on the back of the Yamaha, the first thing we want to do is remove what we call the bag well. The bag well is this giant plastic piece on the back of the golf cart. To do so, for different golf carts, you're going to either have a 10mm bolt that's holding the bag well in, or an H5, which today we have an H5. So you're going to remove both of these bolts and the whole plastic bag well to come out. Alrighty, now we can see everything we're going to be working with. We're going to have 2 shocks, our entire sway bar, and our sway bar bracket. The first piece is going to be the rear bar. The rear bar is going to sit in between your shocks and your frame, just like this. And the second piece we're going to be using is our sway bar plate. The sway bar plate is going to connect to your sway bar bracket. So it'll sit in there like this. When you took your rear bar out of the box, it should have came with 4 2.5-inch bolts, 4 9/16 nuts, and 2 spacers. And go ahead and grab 8 extra washers that came in the hardware kit. Alrighty, to remove the suspension, the top bolt is a 14mm. So you're gonna take your 14mm wrench and put on the back side, and take your 14mm socket and put it on the front. It is extremely important that you leave the bolt inserted after you have removed the nut. Now that we have the nuts off, to remove the bolts, we're going to use a jack to support the frame. So you're going to put a little bit of pressure with your jack, and that'll allow you to remove these bolts. Next, we're going to jack up the frame to create space for that rear bar to fit in between the shocks and the frame. So when installing the rear bar, you're going to have the longer ends facing towards the top, and they're going to be getting 2 spacers in between each one. When we go to put it on, we want these bars on the rear bar on the outside of the frame. And take your spacer and put it on the inside of the frame and through the bolt. After you have your bolt through the hole, go ahead and add a washer and a nut on the back side. All right, once you have the top bolts hand tightened, we need to get these shocks on the lower bracket of this rear bar. To do so, we're just gonna jack it up a little bit higher. Just like how we did on the top bolt, go ahead and put your bolt through the bottom, and you will not need a spacer this time. Then you can put your washer and your nut on the back side. Go ahead and hand tighten that as well. Now that we have all the bolts hand tight, we can go ahead and tighten them up. Go ahead and grab your 9/16 wrench and your 9/16 socket and go ahead and tighten it all the way out. Now it's time to remove the bolt that holds the upper sway bar to the sway bar bracket. To do so, you're gonna need a 17mm wrench and your 17mm socket. When we install the sway bar plate, it comes with a 2.5-inch bolt and a 3/4 nut. It was already in the plate out of the package, so go ahead and use that. You're also going to use the same bolt and nut you removed from the sway bar earlier. You can see we're looking at the sway bar and the sway bar bracket. We're going to go ahead and put our sway bar plate in between the two. If you look, we have a bolt that is welded on. That is going to go right into this little small hole. Once that's in, go ahead and take that 1.5-inch bolt and hand tighten it in there. If you're having a little bit of trouble to get it in, go ahead and grab a ratchet and use that to tighten it in there. After you have the 2.5-inch bolt in there, go ahead and add that 3/4 nut in the rack. Hand tighten that on there. Now take that original bolt and washer we removed from the sway bar, and it's going to go right back through the upper part of the sway bar. And if you look up here, we have a tall hole. Go ahead and stick the bolt through that. Now go ahead and put that 17mm nut on the back side and hand tighten it. After everything is hand tight, remember we have a 17mm nut and bolt on top, but a 3/4 nut and bolt on the bottom. Go ahead and tighten everything up. Alright guys, it's time to put on our wheels. But as you can see, the rocker panel is sticking out a little too far, so when we put on our wheels, it hits. So what we're going to go ahead and do is cut that back, and that'll allow our wheel to fit. Alrighty, so how we want to cut this rocker panel is we want to follow the body's line. So to mask out your line, go ahead and grab the tape and follow the body. This will show you where you need to cut. After your tape is on, this will give you a guideline to follow whenever you cut. We're going to use a Sawzall. For you guys at home, you can use a Dremel or any kind of tool that you guys would prefer. And remember, safety first. Getting the cut started can be tricky, but if you take it slow at the start, you should be able to do this pretty easy. You can now see that our rocker panel is a little rough on the edge. Go ahead and just use a razor blade or anything else you have at home to clean up the lines a little bit. Now, you can go ahead and grab your wheels and put them on your golf cart. Alrighty guys, hopefully y'all's Yamaha Drive 2 looks as good as ours. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comments. We're always happy to help. Please like and subscribe to see what we do next.